Good morning, everyone. um, Deirdre Brennan at Rails with our special member update today to talk about, let's see, what do we talk about today? What should we talk about? We can talk about the Cubs or, no, kidding. Can't talk about the Cubs or the White Sox. Anyway, okay, no, in all seriousness, we're here to talk about how we're all doing with the COVID-19 virus and how we are, what we're thinking about for the future and share information and all that good stuff that we are so good at and do all the time. So I just want to remind everybody, we think we have about 600 people on this meeting today, which is a record. It's, every single one has been another record. We even had to increase our Zoom account yesterday to accommodate everybody. But, it's a good thing because this is, this is why we're here, why Rails is here, and, why we're all here to, help each other. That all being said, it is a webinar. If, please use the chat. I know that you are. I can tell you are already. So that's great. We'll be monitoring that, of course, and answering questions as best we can. If we don't answer them right away, we'll get to them. We'll acknowledge them. I think, unfortunately, as I said, this is now the third time we've done this, and I think we get better at it every time. I hope that will be true today. Of course, we're going to give you the latest information. You've seen the agenda. We're going to run through a number of things. We're going to give you the latest information as we know it, because it changes so quickly, as you all know also. So just, bear that in mind, and then, of course, plenty of opportunity for you all to ask questions on chat, etc. So I'll just dig in first by saying that, I think that we all need to be prepared and I'm preparing myself for there. Normal is going to look different when we do get back to normal. And I think that, we have to just keep that in mind at all times, and that as we make plans for tomorrow or next month or next year, I think we have to be sure that we keep our minds open to there being just a very new situation. I think that I'm sure, because you're all librarians, you read the newspapers, digitally. I mean, I saw articles this morning about how, the economy may never be the same again in terms of how people, share with each other, how countries rely on each other, the whole global economy. How safe are people going to feel, coming into our buildings even, we can't predict any of these things. I know that everybody has their local situations. Everybody has, most of us have boards of trustees who we believe in local control. And I see that, I know that you're under a lot of pressure to reopen, but I think, you cannot act too soon. This is a public health emergency, a public health crisis. And if you're getting pressure now from people to reopen, think about the pressure or the pushback you're going to get, the complaints from the other side. If you do reopen, or you do curbside service, or however you try to decide to do it first, you're going to then get criticized by the people who don't think you should be open or don't think you should be providing service. They're going to want to know how you're protecting them. At least as well as I do, that in any community there's at least two sides to an issue. So you just have to keep that in mind. We can't react quickly because things are we just have to stay the course and really take the long view, and we have to stick together on this. That's my sermon at the beginning of this, but it's just, it's just really important that we don't react. We have to think carefully before we do anything. So at this point, I think I will go on down to the update on Rails programs and services in case unless somebody has anything particular that they want to say right now. Looks to me like people are saying that they agree. I'm sure there's people who don't, but which is fine. But I just want everybody to think very carefully before they do anything. And we'll talk more about how to do that in a positive way, so with our boards, etc. Okay, so as far as Rails goes, obviously delivery is closed. Our buildings are closed. I was in the office yesterday in order to sign checks, and we are doing that on every other week pretty much. I think I told you the last time, we are particularly concerned about some of our smaller vendors, and also about the libraries that are engaged and the other subrecipients that are engaged in the census grant. We want them to be paid, obviously, because that they're doing work and they need to be reimbursed for it. We have, of course, talked about the concept of reopening delivery in the sense of how would we do it? How do you even begin to start up something like that that's so interrelated? And we'll talk about that a little bit more later when we get into the safe handling of materials, because that's really what it's all about. Speaking of the census itself will be the U.S. Bureau of the Census has extended the census timeline. We are not sure how that affects our grant, because our grant was it's a state grant. It's a fiscal year grant. We just haven't heard anything about how they're going to deal with the fact that June 30th is the end of the fiscal year, and if the money can be carried over. My personal opinion is that they are, I'm sure, weighing what will happen next fiscal year to their money. When I say they, I mean the IDHS, Department of Human Services. They got $50 million from the governor to do this project. At the time, it's great, and $50 million next year may be a lot of jobs, a lot of state revenue that needs to be spent somewhere else. We just don't know what to say about that, but we are continuing our project in a very different way, of course. A lot of social media work going on, and just waiting to see what happens with the actual what we hear from IDHS. We are having our board meeting on Friday, April 24th, a week from tomorrow. I've seen that a lot of you have been having Zoom meetings with your boards, and it's been an adventure. I hope that ours goes smoothly. We generally have to meet, remotely, so I think it will be smooth, and we will be talking we will just be doing essential business. We have to take a look at the first draft of our budget and plan of service for next year, which, by the way, they are based on level funding, which is what the state library directed us. Whether that will be the case, we don't know, but we will deal with that when the time comes. So that's really the main item of business, is the budget. You all know, I think, that certification has been suspended for this year, and our understanding of that is that libraries that were members last July 1st, approved as official members after the last certification, plus any members that have been approved since then, that is our membership. So I think that I really appreciated the state library doing that. That was, particularly because, for any library that came back as an unexpected response, it was impossible really to get in touch with anybody to verify what that meant. So And then they have also relaxed the non-resident rules. I think, relaxation of rules and laws during this time is kind of is a theme, as I will discuss in a little bit about another law. So, Betsy Adamowski at Wheaton, she kind of took the lead on this. Her board approved handing out temporary cards to non-residents, just as long as until September 1st, as I understand it. And, this is a local issue. If boards vote to do this, they certainly can. There's no mandate for it. So that's also a good thing, because obviously, any way that we can provide more of our resources to people who don't, if they need help with homework, if they need job help, etc., training, all, how to file for unemployment, where's the nearest food pantry, those kinds of things. Our ability to help them is really important. The resources that we can provide, really important. Let's see, I see there's some questions. Oh, Morton approved it last night. That's great. That's great, Alyssa. Justice did too. Yeah, great. Non-resident, Don wants to know as in unserved. Non-resident, yes, as in unserved. I don't think that, as I say, pick the library of your choice. No, I don't think that's anything that boards are going to, they're going to be very specific, as I think they were in Wheaton, doing it for the school district. Another issue that's been on everybody's mind is
I'm sorry. There's also a couple other questions. One was about IPLAR.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
I believe didn't we hear that is still going on with the deadline in effect? Is that
June 1st? Yeah, June 1st.
And then there was also a question about the resumption of delivery, that my library has a number of items in delivery limbo. Yep. I'm very anxious to hear about delivery resumption.
And you will hear about it. Yes, you will. So, and Dawn, I see that you're saying you need some clarification on the non-resident. We can certainly talk offline about that. I can forward you what the state library sent to me. It's pretty much what I said, that they are relaxed for the duration of the governor's emergency order, at least. IPLAR deadline, June 1st. Okay. Okay, so then there's the Illinois reimbursement law, one of our favorites. So this is about if you are working from home when you are not, and you are being asked to use your own resources. And I hope I'm explaining this right. I know Megan Millen is out there somewhere also to help me with this. So if you are using your own resources, your own internet, your own cell phone, your own computer, that libraries have to reimburse you, or employers have to reimburse you for some part of the cost of that. So the advice, the opinion that that Megan did get from the Will County Center for Economic Development and the Illinois Department of Labor was, again, about, was very focused on relaxation. They are interpreting the law with what they are calling a common sense lens. And I think that the same can also be said for what the state library is doing with what, with the IPLAR, with certification, and with the non-resident rules. So, common sense is that if, for example, if we're asking somebody to do a story hour from home and they don't have a computer and they don't have a web and an internet connection, so that they would have to go out and purchase those things, then yes, the library is going to need to reimburse them. But if it's the small thing about that, they already have those things, and we're just, asking them to use them during the pandemic. We don't have to reimburse them. It's not something that the Department of Labor is going to be looking at. No other industry in the state is doing it, not school districts or park districts or municipalities or private businesses. We do not have to worry about this unless a staff member is required to purchase something new to work from home. Okay? So a question about documents or links to the non-resident and the reimbursement relax law. There aren't any documents. This is about relaxation. No, there isn't. This is just a common sense approach that people and organizations, even our state government, is taking. You're not going to get a document. That's the whole point. It may not be the advice that you got from HR Source. I'm telling you that this is during the pandemic. Okay, this is a special situation. And I mean, you can do what you want to do, but I'm telling you that we've been told by authoritative sources that you don't have to do it. Okay.
Hi, this is actually Jim Griffin from HR Source. I just wanted to double check. Who told you that?
Department of Labor.
Okay.
It's just because of the pandemic. I'm not saying that I'm interpreting the law correctly, Jim, because I'm not, but I'm telling you what they are saying. No, I understand, because we've been dealing with this ourselves. But during this crisis, they are not going to be looking at whether a library is paying somebody $15 a week for something. They're just not.
Okay, great. And that's good. If possible, I probably still would comply, because there were a lot of class action lawsuits in California over this type of issue. And
during the pandemic? During the pandemic?
No, but so the Department of Labor does have the power to issue emergency rules, and some of our state agencies have, and the Department of Labor has not yet. So I would be hesitant to not pay something, but I totally get it, and I appreciate that that's not what you were told, and I'm happy to talk with whoever did.
Well, I see that Megan has said that she will contact you after this with the person that you can contact, because they want you to reach out.
Great. Okay, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you didn't interrupt. I'm glad you're here, and we'll no doubt, put you on the spot later on. But and like I say, I'm not a lawyer. I always say that. I'm definitely not a lawyer, and I'm not an HR, source specialist. But this is, just think about common sense. We all need to use common sense at all times, right, Brian Shepard, as he just said. Okay. I mean, again, you can do what you're going to do. I'm just telling you that you don't have to do it. Okay. Any questions at this point that we should address before we move on to libraries as essential services? We will talk about delivery later, as I said, when we get to the safe handling of materials. I think we have to talk about that too. And yes, Megan is correct. No, you must not all call the Department of Labor. That would be a very bad thing. They might change their mind. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Megan? No. Okay. Okay. All right. So libraries as essential services. Okay. So, we've gotten ourselves into something of a pickle here, because we are not essential. Libraries have not been deemed essential in the governor's executive order proclamation about, only essential services should be open. Now, I hope that you have all looked at the list of essential services, because it is truly weird. And, the idea that a car wash is essential, is more essential than a library is this, I mean, to me, it's just like, that's just ridiculous. So I don't know who made the list, but so that's the first problem. The second problem is that, equating being able to be closed physically with not being essential is not going to do us any good going forward, because when it comes time, to be advocating for budgets again, and some of our funders are going to say to us, well, you're not essential, you don't need money, we have to give money to essential services. Hopefully they don't mean car washes, but you see where I'm going with this. So the message really has to be that we are essential to the building and keeping of an engaged and enlightened society. Apparently there was a webinar yesterday that the United for Libraries did, where one of the messages that they gave out was that we are essential to the rebuilding of a robust economy. I mean, think of all the things that we do that are essential. We are not first responders. That is true. That is absolutely true. But we help first responders, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I think we are also not closed. We are open virtually 24/7. We've spent a lot of time and money over the last couple of decades, building up, really robust virtual services. And I think that I'm going to put Layla on the spot. She's out there somewhere to just talk a little bit about what she knows is going on in some of our libraries in terms of virtual services and reference and all that. Are you there, Layla? Maybe she's not.
She raised her hand. I saw in the chat that she's efforting getting her as a panelist so we can hear her. So they're working on it.
Oh, there she is. Okay. Thank you, guys. I think she's coming. Bear with us.
Deirdre, while we're waiting, someone asked where they could see the list of essential services.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't send it to you right now, but it's in it's if you look for the governor's order, the governor's
I think I found it. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So when we have been having some of our networking meetings and things, hi everybody.
Hi, Leila.
One of the things that was coming up is we were just hearing about how incredibly busy the managers and reference librarians and things are. So even while we're not in our physical spaces, the demand because of the e-content, they are juggling all reference calls online. They are helping people get connected to their devices. So the good piece of that is that we've really been able to make have some success just having people exploring all the e-resources and e-content and things that libraries are able to offer while we're closed. And just that ability to connect people with information while still keeping them safe is something really special that libraries are doing. So there is definitely a lot of demand and stress on all of our librarians, even while we're being closed, but also a great ability to connect.
Thank you very much, Layla. And as people are saying in the chat too, I mean, they're doing chat reference at UIC. Hi, Gwen. Online reference. There's so many things going on. We have, and as William Elliott says, we should emphasize that we are important as our schools, which are, well, public. It's interesting. Educational institutions were deemed essential, but they're not physically open either. So it's on the list. So the whole thing is, I mean, like I say, it's the weirdest list. And so I think we need to, look into ourselves and our profession and our libraries and say, yes, we are essential. We are, and we have to, and one of the ways that we prove that is also, relaxing, rules like the non-resident rules, so that we can serve children in our, in our communities, even if they're in our, part of our unincorporated communities. It's common sense.
And people are talking about their the virtual story times and book clubs, and they're getting great attendance. The libraries are talking about 30 people coming to these book talks and book clubs and things. And so that's really exciting too.
Yes, and Betsy told me, Betsy Adamowski, they've given out hundreds of library cards since they relaxed these rules. And, again, they're temporary. They're going to go away on September 1st. She hopes, that some of the people will re-up. I mean, that's a risk, that we're taking. But so that is my rant on essential. We are essential.
Well, we still have Layla. Someone is asking for updates on member discounts for digital resources.
Go ahead, Layla.
Okay, so a couple that we just put out, RB Digital. We've had one with them for a couple months with unlimited audiobooks. They just added unlimited magazines, unlimited comics, and an online language, transparent language. And we're getting some good reaction to that. And that's really helping libraries beef up some of these e-content resources in an affordable way. Another one that we just started offering was Pressbooks. And that again is online digital newspapers and digital magazines. And some of our libraries are really excited about that resource. They've had it for a couple months and they are getting some really good usage on the newspapers. We are working with EBSCO on a couple things. And I'm also working with Gale. We just we're finalizing the details on some Gale in context resources for the schools. And next, I know that some people have been asking about Beanstack and Reading Squared and Wandu for summer reading purposes. So I'll be reaching out to them too. Yes, the RB Digital stuff is highlighted on the website. So you can get information about any of the deals and discounts on the deals and discounts page. You do need to be logged in. And at the top, the new ones are always highlighted at the top. I'm just looking at any of these other questions. Anything else I can answer on that now? So we're just always looking for deals. And I appreciate the suggestions that I get too for them. And I always appreciate any feedback on them.
And Dan just posted that you can see the whole list of Rails deals and discounts on the website. This information is also in the e-news. And again, if we don't immediately respond to your question, we will look at the chat. We may get to it later. We may answer it later. So just bear with us.
And it really does help. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it really does help and is important when you do participate in these deals. Our vendors watch that, and the more participation we get, the more leverage I have in negotiating better, more advantageous costs for us. So, so do know that it really is appreciated and helpful and hopefully for everybody when you do join in on these deals and discounts.
So Jim Schultz has called me on the car wash thing. I'm not being on the list. I would have sworn that was on the list, but okay. I also want to go back to the IPLAR date. I apologize. I know that the deadline depends on your fiscal year, and so I apologize if I confused anybody. But I think that Jennifer set them straight. Somebody did. I think it was Jennifer. All right, car washes are open in Gurnee. Thank you, Ryan Livergood. Anyway, we don't need to belabor that. So Monica is here, and there's also some interesting work related to Essential that the National League of Cities has spearheaded. I think you're going to talk about that, Monica.
Yes, I'd love to. So hi, everybody. I'm Monica Harris, also from Rails. So we have been looking at some great work that was put out by the National League of Cities, and I think it was in cooperation with Bloomberg Philanthropy, where they're noting all of the different things that cities are doing as a local action tracker to note the different ways that different municipalities and communities are responding to COVID-19. What we would like to do is take some of those same categories that they have already identified and enlist your help in showing the ways that you all are doing things that are essential services that are happening right now in Illinois. So on the library's COVID Pulse page, right at the top, you will see a new survey that has launched just as of this morning that notes a different group of what we're noting as essential services pieces that we can use as advocacy pieces for the whole state of Illinois going forward. So any type of library, any library all over Illinois, we want to hear about all of the things that you're doing that would be in addition to the kind of virtual service programs that you've shared with us, to share what some of those things are. Just very briefly, I want to go over what some of those categories are so you have an understanding of what's there. But as I've said, the survey is available currently on the library's Pulse page, and as it's populated with results, you'll be able to see those results there as well. So categories include things like digital connectivity. As you all have noted, libraries are leaving the Wi-Fi on, so it can be accessed from parking lots. Some libraries have been able to circulate mobile Wi-Fi hotspots. I was in a Prairie Cat member meeting yesterday where 51% of Prairie Cat libraries began offering new digital library card registration for the very first time as a response to COVID. So things like this are things that are going to really show how libraries have moved and adapted to make sure that these things are available for people. Business economic stability is another piece that's noted here, and that is how we are supporting our local businesses in our communities through sharing information, aggregating for them, and having those pieces that remain. So if you're doing that kind of work, we want to hear about it. Of course, many of you are huge hubs of communication in your communities. I know, for example, at Skokie Public Library, they're continuing their civic lab through chat and had one recently on the misinformation of COVID-19. And then at Arlington Heights, we've seen that they're doing a story collection where they're actually collecting individual stories and shares about what's going on during specifically COVID-19 to communicate and share those with their group. And these are just a few examples that we've heard about. We really, really want to hear about yours. So please make sure that you're entering and sharing. Individual and family financial stability. So for libraries that are offering job seeking assistance, for those reference librarians that are happening that we're hearing about right now, where people are helping people with their devices and connecting them to technology and materials that they really need to learn how to use. There are libraries like the Morton Public Library that's offering virtual programming on estate planning and other things that have become really important to people. And so again, showing how you're doing some of those things. Food and nutrition, there are some libraries who are doing meal distribution to those who are in need, and then also libraries who have food pantries outside of their buildings. So we want to hear about that as well. Education and childcare. So many of you are doing so much with early literacy resources. Of course, sharing, we all have e-resources that we're sharing and expanding. And then moving to online learning, our academic librarians have often moved to asynchronous instruction. We have libraries like Elmhurst Public Library that include instruction for students applying to college, how they can prepare for virtual college visits, which all the colleges have had to adapt to. So again, you are doing these things right now. We just want to hear about them so we can advocate for them. And of course, we're going to hear more in the category of medical and behavioral health later. So our libraries that are doing some of our 3D printing and face shields, some of our libraries are collecting PPE, and there are some libraries who are also hosting blood drives in their buildings, even as they're closed. So again, share these things with us, share how libraries are doing these pieces. We really want to hear about those from you.
Thank you, Monica. The again, this is you know, about essential, and there's been a great conversation on the chat too. Thank you, Matt Sudar, about, you know, educational institutions. We are educational institutions. That's a point that I have also made. So again, you know, don't let somebody else tell you that you're essential or not essential. And it's true. You know, somebody said to me that the essential list was made by lobbyists, which is probably true. And you know, car wash owners. I'm sticking to my car wash thing. Okay. Anything else about I'm sure there is, but we're gonna keep going. So and I know that Mary and Nicole and Dan are monitoring the questions. Is there anything that we should answer right now, you guys, or there was something about?
Not that I can see. No.
Okay. If
A
we
lot of
missed,
discussion, but no burning
Okay.
question.
okay, if we missed something that's burning, put it in there again. Okay. So the virtual services offerings, which we've already gotten a good start on here, but Monica, you want to take that too?
Sorry, let me unmute. Yes, so thank you all so much for all of the contributions that you have made via the virtual services programs that are there. If you haven't looked at that, I would really encourage you as you're developing your programs. People are continuing to add to it all the time. We have a very, very creative community who are doing amazing things and adding to that. If you didn't know, when you look at the results page, you can also go ahead and search by age group or by type of library. So you actually have the opportunity to search for your own inspiration as you're seeing that. And most libraries have also added a link to the material that they're doing, so you can actually get an example of how people are creating and doing the programs they're doing. So as you're looking to innovate for your community, please continue to share those things with us so that we can look at that and then continue to look at the event as well. But we do know that there are lots of great conversations happening around all the different kinds of programs that people are doing. And I know that we have a panelist here who is going to talk a little bit about summer reading, because we all know that summer reading is on everybody's minds for how they're going to be handling and moving those things forward.
Am I up?
No, you're on.
Amanda.
Hi.
Can you introduce yourself, Amanda?
I can. So my name is Amanda Margus. I'm the Assistant Manager Youth Services at the Northbrook Public Library. And a call was put out asking about libraries that are planning summer reading programs with a very heavy virtual component. So at Northbrook, we've used ReadSquared for actually the last 3 years, and we've been the first year we had it totally just on the staff side, but then the last 2 years we've allowed patrons to log and track from home, as well as still coming into the building. So we actually had a planning meeting like the week after this shelter-in-place order came through. So we immediately started really looking at ReadSquared and what opportunities there were to move as much as we could online, knowing especially at that point that we had no idea when we would be allowed in the building, when we'd be open to the public. So obviously it allows for people to log in, have passwords. ReadSquare also does allow for family accounts. So just one adult could have all their children accounts with one login, which is a nice feature. Another thing, it's one reason that we decided to go with that product over another is that it is a badge-based system. So we can set our badges to be whatever they want. We can put in graphics. We could say you have to do one badge before another badge. There's a lot that was customizable about that part, which was really important to us because we have an adult program, we have a youth program, we have a baby program, we have a teen program. So having different options on how to actually set up the program and what it looks like and the functionality was really important to us. So this year, one thing that we're looking at beefing up a lot more than even what we've done in previous years, ReadSquared also allows the function of having online reading lists. So we can put reading lists in there. We can have, it automates links that go directly to our catalog, which is really nice. We can also set those links to go to Overdrive, to the digital library. We can have it go to Hoopla if we wanted to, different titles in there. Another thing that we are doing is looking at missions. So that's a little widget that comes with ReadSquare that allows you to say, if you do these additional activities, you can also get points towards your program. So right now we actually did launch a spring reading program that doesn't have any prizes, doesn't really have any tracking. It's just sort of a way for people to put their books in and share. But one thing we did put in was a mission to help celebrate National Poetry Month, because it's April and that's usually something we celebrate in the library with installations. Since we can't do that, we decided to make a mission of read a poem to a family member, or watch a poet read their own poem on a video, chalk a poem on the sidewalk. Some things that would also correspond with physical distancing, but still help celebrate poetry. So that's something we're going to be looking at doing, hopefully in the summer, having these missions that will, you know, still connect our community with us, even if they can't come into the building as they have been before. Another thing that we're going to be looking at with ReadSquare is they do have a module that allows for uploading of like virtual coupons. Obviously, in the past, we would hand out something physical when the kids would come visit us. That's not probably going to be an option right away, at least. So, how can we get this material to our patrons? Especially we're looking at purchasing a lot more incentives and prizes from our local businesses rather than asking for donations. We're doing a little bit of a flip. We're going to be saving money in some ways because we're not going to be doing our full program. So we're looking to ways to invest that back in our community, and using the offers module was really important to us. So those are the big things we're doing. I would say, we did look at Beanstack. We actually have used Wandu in the past. We decided to go to ReadSquare because it worked for our library. But while we were researching them, reaching out to all three of the companies, like they were happy to set up demos for us. ReadSquare has also done virtual demos while we've been closed. So definitely, if you're interested in any of those products, reaching out to those sales reps and those people, I would highly recommend, because they were very helpful when we were deciding.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, and I can drop my email in the panel if anyone has any really specific questions about ReadSquare they want to ask me later.
We did want to make sure that you all know as well that in addition to some of the great programs that are happening around e-story times, we do have a program coming up here at Rails. This is also linked on our Rails Pulse page, but coming up on April the 21st, there's a program called Beyond E-Story Times Virtual Services and Programs for Youth that will cover a lot of different kinds of e-resources that librarians at the Vernon Area Public Library, Northbrook Public Library, and Lincolnwood Public Library are doing. So please join us for that.
Thank you, Monica. And again, it's just amazing what people are doing out there. And, the sharing is, the way that libraries share and don't try to compete is always just so wonderful. So, again, we got to stick together and, show people we're essential, because we are. And I just want to circle back about one more thing that I forgot to say. So we are actually working collaboratively with ILA on this whole advocacy essential piece as well. We've drafted an article with a lot of the information that you've been hearing about in terms of programming that's being offered, but also just the message about being essential and being open. So we're working on that. We're going to be working on some. It's all related, obviously, to our My Library Is campaign and showing the value of libraries. Never was that more important than it is right now. So we will be reaching out with that. We'll be asking for your help, asking for more examples, etc. And yeah, so I should have said that at the beginning, but as always, we are so happy to partner with ILA, and I think this is going to be really great for everybody. So, okay, so anything else about, I see there's still questions about the Wheaton and the non-resident cards. Yes, Emily, they are giving temporary cards to non-residents in their school district. So the non-resident rules have been relaxed. I can talk to you or email you offline. Okay, she's got it. Okay. Speaking of being essential and being helpful to first responders, we are now going to move on to 3D printing in libraries, and Dan's going to take this.
Hi, thanks, Deirdre. Hi, everyone. Dan Bostrom, Rails Member Engagement Manager, and this is a great extension of libraries sharing and libraries working together. I think this is an awesome thing that's come out, so I just wanted to share a little bit about it. So just to give you some background, last week and even before that a little bit, there were some discussions on the Makerspace email list about libraries doing different things, printing doing 3D printing face masks. They were talking about designs. They were talking about sanitizing the equipment. They were sharing files. Part of, frankly, I don't know anything about 3D printing, but part of it is you need to like upload files. Someone could school me on this, I don't know. But at the same time, these discussions were going on, we started hearing from healthcare providers, and I really want to thank the folks at Hinsdale Public Library. They were great in setting us up with some connections to Amita Health. So we had the libraries doing this thing, and then we had the healthcare providers doing it on the other side. It's great that I get to use my hands and you can see me to illustrate my point here. We've trying to figure out a way to bring them together, and this is where my colleague Jen Hovanek from Indian Trails really stepped up, and she was the first one to kind of come up with the idea of putting together an online meeting, sort of like this, and we did that last week. So we invited some speakers, someone from Amita Health, Dr. Bonnie Chen. She came and talked about what the need was and what libraries could do to print those things. She also was great about answering questions in terms of production, in terms of what they were looking for, how libraries can sort of sanitize materials and package them. That event was recorded, and it's available from the Rails YouTube page. I know that I'm going to get that question, so I'll share the link in a second here. Part of the second half of that was a discussion that Jen led, and we heard from individual libraries of what they were doing, and some of you have different printers, and some of you have seen different designs for the headsets, and we were trying to match the designs with the needs of the healthcare providers, and just looking for tips on providers, who are the suppliers that can give us the materials to print these things. So there were a lot of discussions about that, and at that point, we decided maybe something that the best thing that could come out of it would be some sort of sharing document that we could put together. So to tell you a little bit more about this, I'm going to turn it over to Jen Hovanek from the Indian Trails Public Library. Good morning.
Hi, happy to see everybody. I see so many familiar names. It's not familiar faces right now, but hi, everybody. One of the most exciting things that I think happened at that meeting was you got to see library workers doing what they do best, and that's finding reliable information and gathering it in an easy-to-use resource. So Rails is hosting it under the COVID-19 section on the website. So if you scroll down, you can find it. If you're like me, you just hit Command F and put 3D. It'll come right up, I promise. As well, a link to the video as well. So it's a one-stop shop. It's a Google Sheet that we actually left editable by the entire maker community, because as quickly as something goes out, something new comes up that is even better. And that's the total maker way. What you'll find there are a few different tabs. So the first tab is the space where we have people who are already doing 3D printing, and it gives some of that basic information. So if your library is doing something and it's not yet on the sheet, we encourage you to put it up there. It's a great opportunity for people to identify neighbors who are already having success at their 3D printing, and provides a resource for people to reach out to very quickly without sending it to our list, I think, of over 800 or 900 subscribers. The email list. So it's a quick way to get there. The second tab talks about healthcare facilities. So again, our primary contact via Hinsdale and their wonderful connections they had was with Amita Health. But what we found was that there were people who had already sort of gone out and found spaces and local facilities in need. So there are actually now spaces on there from Lake County to Peoria. So if you do have some interest in reaching out to those people individually, or there are links and phone numbers, etc., to find out how best to get the pieces to the facilities, again, click there. You'll find at least 5 to 10 different spaces in different areas of the state. The third tab that's really important for you to hit is the download files. So again, sharing reliable information is very important. The National Institute of Health actually has a 3D printing hub, and there are over 600 different files that individual makers have put out there, but there are a total of 3 or 4 that are actually approved by healthcare facilities. So we wanted to make sure that the ones we were putting out there were going to be fruitful and helpful to our first responders. So people are not only putting what can be printed, but they are also putting file settings, amount of time to provide for planning, etc. So no need to reinvent the wheel. If you want to get started with your 3D printing, you can, dip your toe in on that tab. And then one of the other most important things, and this has been the place where we've seen just a great deal of generosity, again, total library spirit, is certain libraries have volunteered to be drop-off hubs. And they're listing days that they're available, times that they're available. Also, we've seen quite a few tips on handling and packaging for items to be donated and dropped off. So if there are shields or face mask pieces you'd like to drop off, you can. Somebody mentioned, I saw about laser cutters in the chat section. I 100% know that they would take those as well. I just looked this morning and there were a few listings regarding that. If you have a laser cutter and you'd like to participate, all of these pieces are put together individually. The big thing we heard was that healthcare facilities are looking for even individual pieces that they can assemble together. So if you're interested in helping and participating, they would love to have it. So I think that's it, right? I'm happy to answer any other questions. Just let me know.
All right, thank you so much, Jen. Thank you, Dan. That is really inspiring, the way everybody's working together on this. As you said, just perfect example of library generosity and essentialness. Not to bring that up again, but proves my point. Okay. Any efforts to create these for our library staff workers and distribute to all libraries? May come to that, but I think at this point we are focusing on first respond on healthcare workers, obviously.
Yeah, can I just jump in here and say that the need from the healthcare field seems pretty intense, and we're having people reach out to us, saying that they are willing to provide a courier service to come pick up this stuff. So they want it badly. So I think we're going to focus on the healthcare field first.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay.
And that's also noted in the sheet as well, just so you know, that's already there too. So check that out if you're interested.
Right. Okay, great. All right, so speaking of,
Dee, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
I just see that somebody has their hand up. Mary Sharon, I don't know if you meant to raise your hand or not, but if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Nikki. And I just noticed we have 705 participants. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so speaking of safety, I guess, I want to update you on what's going on with some nationwide discussions on, globally, I guess, how to safely handle materials, library materials. I got in touch with some people a few weeks ago at IMLS, and because I've been very concerned about this, the safe handling of materials, because we don't know. I believe that we don't know when they are safe. If not only don't we know how to handle them to make them safe, but we don't know if they're safe to begin with. So just where do we even begin on this? So, and I also was seeing, there's so many discussions going on. I'm on different consortia lists and library lists, and this group is thinking this, and we get this advice from the CDC, and then we get, conflicting advice from somebody else. And was making me very nervous because, you know, I mean, not only, I mean, just from the human side, I mean, we want to keep, you know, people safe, but we also don't want to be sued for not keeping people safe. I mean, there's safety issues. There are lots of, I don't know where this is coming from, IMLS sponsored webinar, CDC, right? But it's not this simple. It's not this simple. So anyway, so the IMLS director, Crosby Kemper, who used to be the library director, I think, in Kansas City. I think I got that right. He is the IMLS director now. And so he has put together a group of people, a group of organizations to work on this, to work on the science. And one of the, so Pat Lazinski in Columbus Metro Library in Ohio has contacts with a research organization called Battelle. And I don't know personally anything about them, but they have committed to working on this. They have the virus in their laboratories, and they are looking at different, you know, what does it do when it's on a book versus what it does when it's on a, you know, a DVD or a CD, etc. Also, OCLC is engaged in this because they're going to be, when the science is determined, they will be a place that we can go and get information, you know, authoritative information and training in terms of, yes, thank you, Carolyn. Kansas City, Missouri Public Library. Sorry. So we had a call yesterday, Monica and I did, with the Metro system in New York, which, as you can imagine, is they're right at the epicenter, and they have a lot of concerns about this too. A lot of organizations do. Also, PLA is engaged in this, as is the Urban Libraries Council, because we all need to you know, understand just, you know, when is an item safe. I mean, if you think about the sort of the web of materials that delivery is, I mean, they come from everywhere. They may be safe at one point, but then they're handled in it, you know, by someone, and they get contaminated, and then they're not safe again. I mean, how do we begin to understand this? How do we deal with it? How do we handle materials safely? I know a lot of you are thinking about, you know, curbside service, but I would really think very carefully about that, because you know, how are you going to be sure that an item is clean when you give it to someone or when you get it back from someone? What are you going to do to make sure that your staff person or you or a child doesn't get sick? This is like, you know, this is just this is a health issue. It's not a library service issue. We just have to be so careful about this. So this group is working. They're currently engaged. IMLS is funding this work. We agreed yesterday to develop some case statements that we can give, just as an example, you know, give to Battelle. You know, what about curbside service? I mean, what do we do? You know, how do we tell a library to handle if they want to, you know, reopen and, you know, not have people come into the buildings, but to actually be exchanging, you know, materials, you know, with the public outside. So again, I would say, please do not think that you can reopen too early. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. So please just you know, be patient as we go through some of this work. You know, delivery, we're not going to start delivery until we know it's safe. Like, I'm just going to put that right out there, because we're not going to endanger our staff, and we're not going to endanger you either. So you know, and I would imagine that the consortia are feeling, you know, somewhat the same way too. We're having our consortia committee meeting on Monday, but I haven't spoken to them directly about this, although Carolyn Coulter and I have had some interchanges. This is, you know, because, you know, one of the things that's made us strong is the fact that we are so interconnected. And, you know, because we share so well, but that also means that you can't just start up one piece of it and think that it's not going to have an effect on the rest of it. And yes, it's not just information about materials, it's about information about buildings, it's about, you know, equipment that is used to handle material, you know, handling systems, right? I mean, all of these things are impacted, and there is just not a simple answer. If there were a simple answer, we would not be in lockdown for a month. So this is just, we have to be very patient and protect our public. And, you know, virtual service, that's what we're doing right now. So again, we will not be reopening delivery until we know it's safe. So any questions about that or comments? Is there any chance, so what's the timeline? Well, that's a good question. I mean, we're really pushing this. You know, frankly, I'm kind of amazed that things have been happening as fast as they have, given it's the federal government. Sorry, but yes, I think the goal is, you know, weeks for sure. So it is, and yes, it is very early. So let's see, if the executive order is lifted, how do you tell your public you are not offering anything because you haven't received the definitive okay that everything is safe? I don't have an answer to that, Mary, because we're not there yet. So the stuff that's stuck in delivery limbo is presumably clean because it hasn't been exposed for almost a month. Well, presumably is a key word there. We have no authority to you know, to say that it's clean. But yeah, that's one of the questions I think that we have to wrestle with. I do have a call tomorrow, I think, yeah, Friday, with the State Library and with Heartland and Carly to talk about this. Yes, thank you, Sarah. You know, we have to stay you know, focused on the long view. And let's see, Richard has more about the statements made about the CD expert. Well, hi, Richard. There was conflicting information. They answered the question about, you know, yes, it's safe if this, but then when there were further questions about, well, what if this happens or that happens? Well, then no, we don't know if it's safe. So it, you know, it didn't fill me with confidence. But I can send you some stuff offline and we can put some information. You know, this is still developing. And I really hope that it ends up that there's a really easy answer, but we just all think that we need to know what the answer is before we, you know, tell people, sure, just go ahead and share things. And, you know, yeah.
I was just going to interject for just a moment, just to say one of the issues with the CDC epidemiologist who is on was that they were specifically talking about how long the virus lives on paper or on cardboard. And so when the questions that arose were around, well, this is getting passed from patron to patron. What if there are fluids in their home that are coming in contact with plastic covers? What if, you know, there were just a lot of situations about how many people were touching these materials that it was just clear that the epidemiologist didn't have a clear understanding of how library materials move from person to person and how many people touch them. And so that's part of what we're trying to do with the IMLS and these case studies, is to really come up with a situation where we understand exactly how many people touch what types of materials so that we can really get an accurate scientific response as to what's safe and what isn't.
Thank you for putting that so well. Yes, it was, yes, you know, they're not used to the idea of this like recirculating. And So they really couldn't answer that question. And I mean, we all know that library materials go bad places when they leave the library, you know, so we know that. Yeah, it's like, I loved it when they said they'd have to sneeze on the books, and the response was, yes, they do sneeze on the books. So anyway, you know, I'm not going to venture any opinions on when, when the reopening date is going to be, when the stay-at-home order will be lifted. You know, I don't know. All we can do is work, carefully and expeditiously as possible to get these answers so that we can begin to, to tell people what safe is, because that's really what it's all about. There's a lot going on out there. Yeah, I mean, if you really think through, Monica and I were going through this yesterday, and if you think about what you would have to do curbside service, do you want to just go through that, Monica, because you had it really clear in your head?
I think one, we all need to make sure that if we're doing these kinds of services, that we have the right protective gear to do them for our staff, number one. And so if we're talking about the way that materials might move or be handled, if you have a pair of gloves, and so if you have to get close to someone, take the materials in hand, use those gloves to touch them, put them aside, then remove those gloves and put on a new pair of gloves before you touch those other ones. Many libraries at this point don't have access to the types of PPE materials in terms of wipes, gloves, masks, other things that are available because the marketplace has such a need for them, that to open them to make sure that you have the correct protective equipment for your staff to be able to do that safely is something that most of us just aren't able to do. I know even through our organization, in trying to order things like hand sanitizer, very, very difficult to get it. And so I just want to make sure, in terms of what we're thinking about, that we're really thinking about not just the safety of our employees, which is obviously paramount and extremely important, but also, the potentials down the line of what this could mean, for our communities.
Yes. So obviously we want to get this information as quickly as possible for our own reasons. I mean, delivery is is a big deal for us, obviously, and we know how much you depend on it. But we also want, we're doing this for you guys because you want, obviously, to keep people safe. We want to keep people safe. We don't want to be, held responsible for making people sick. I mean, that would be, aside from the human cost, terrible. We have to be careful. I know it's hard. We want to serve. This is the same kind of conversation that we had at the beginning of, at our first member update. We can't close. People need us. Well, we have to close. One of the reasons, one of our problems is that there's so many people in our libraries all the time that, that's the great thing, right? But that's one of the reasons we had to be closed. Okay. Yes, Richard Kong, of course, but we'll do it later. So, okay. So we're going to talk now about, we'll go to the employment side here a little bit, and we want to talk about some furloughs and implications for libraries. And we do have Jim Griffin on. Thank you, Jim, from HR Source. And I know that there's a lot of discussion and worry about this out there. Obviously, everybody has to make their own decision. Boards make their own decisions. I just want to say that it is not free to furlough somebody or to put them on unemployment. I mean, if you furlough someone, you have to think about whether they're going to come back. If you lay somebody off, you have to pay them unemployment. You have to think about hiring somebody or trying to rehire them. These are obviously not easy issues. And so we just wanted to, we did want to put it out there that that we want to help you with this. And I'm hoping that maybe I know that HR Source had a webinar yesterday that was very well attended. That was about this very thing. And I'm hoping maybe Jim, you might be willing to say just a few general words on layoffs and the cost of that and furloughs, et cetera.
Sure.
Thank you.
And thanks for having me. And so, yeah, so a furlough, just to distinguish between the two, furlough, we're talking about what's intended to be a temporary separation, a temporary stepping away from work, where we're still considering them employees, but they're not getting paid anymore. They're not doing any work for the library. And then layoffs would be a more permanent separation. And all employees who are furloughed or laid off would be entitled to unemployment. And so that would be a potential cost for employers, including libraries, and particularly for libraries who are reimbursable. So when it comes to unemployment, you can either pay a tax on your payroll, that's a taxable employer, or you could reimburse all unemployment costs. And this is for public employers or nonprofits. So some libraries have chosen to be reimbursable. And if that's the case, then you're paying all of these unemployment costs, except for that $600 supplement that's part of the CARES Act that the federal government is providing. You wouldn't have to pay for that, but all the other unemployment costs you have to pay for. And there was a provision, one version of the CARES Act, that maybe that cost would be cut in half if the state applies for additional funding from the federal government. Illinois hasn't done that yet. But so there's definitely going to be unemployment costs involved for both furloughed employees and laid off employees. There's also potentially risk of litigation, particularly in layoffs. If people claim that they were selected unfairly due to their age, their race, their gender, their religion, their disability, some protected class, then we might have to deal with charges of discrimination or other types of lawsuits. So if we're going to be conducting these, we have to come up with good business reasons for who we selected, why we selected them. And particularly for layoffs, we have to do an adverse impact analysis, make sure once we develop these criteria for how we selected who's being laid off, can we justify that? Particularly if it turns out that whoever we selected, they're all members or primarily members of protected class. So it turns out that the people are laying off are some of our oldest employees, or they're another protected class. We have to be able to justify that decision, and especially if there's an adverse impact. So those are some concerns to consider, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you for bringing up, thanks for bringing up the $600, Jim, because that was asked on chat, but you've already answered it.
Sure.
Other questions?
And I did see somebody say, we've heard that IDS will not raise unemployment insurance rates due to the pandemic. That hasn't happened yet. And it's still on their website that they're not doing that. So I can't guarantee that that's going to happen. And we did not record the webinar yesterday. We have another one this afternoon at 2, and that one's specifically on unemployment. So that might be helpful to sign up for. Free for members and I think inexpensive for non-members. And I'm just trying to read through.
Yep.
And I can't speak to IMRF. So if anybody there knows more about IMRF, I am not in any way an IMRF expert. So I'm sorry, I can't speak to that.
It's okay, we can ask IMRF.
And so what are the additional costs for furloughing or laying off employees if you pay unemployment insurance? So theoretically, your rate's going to go up. There is a chance that Illinois is going to somehow freeze those rates or not have them increase, or maybe they'll increase at a lower percentage than typically, but we haven't seen it yet. Differences between layoff and furlough. So because furlough is supposed to be a temporary separation, we're still considering them employees. Many employers are not paying out accrued vacation, which is something that's required if there's a separation of employment. Because we're considering it temporary, we're not paying out that vacation or PTO. And then with furlough, some employers are also continuing healthcare benefits. If you're going to do that, I would check with your broker and make sure that that's okay and that's in accordance with your plan, because some plans would consider a furlough to be a separation. And so you would have to let them go. Well, you'd have to remove them from the plan and then offer them COBRA. But that's one difference. Those are kind of the key differences. but I'm happy to talk through any other questions.
This is Jim Krieger. I'm the Director of Human Resources and Finance at Rails. And, you know, this question, I think, is we've seen at least one instance where the Executive Director wrote a formal reply and response and cost analysis to their board. But what's really complicated about this, of course, is how long our shutdowns are going to occur and at what point it makes sense to do a furlough or a layoff. But the key point is, I think on this, there's a cost. If you do the furloughs or layoffs, you're going to get higher. I think you can be pretty well assured you'll get higher unemployment cost for several years in your rates, and also you also risk when you call back these employees, you may not be able to get them all back, and you'll get into another round of recruiting and incur costs that way. One interesting point I did see in this analysis is that by doing this, if you do go to layoffs or furloughs, you're really shifting in part some of your taxpayer costs to other taxpayers. So taxpayers are still picking up the tab of this.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
And
a very good point.
oh, there was a question about union environment. You will have to check with your collective bargaining agreement if you're considering a furlough of union employees, because you'll want to comply with the provisions there, and they might dictate who you're selecting and how in the selection process that might impact that.
Yes, I see from Becky Bradford here that you advice on communicating, right? And I think that this is all part of our advocacy piece too, in you know, kind of a different way. I would refer you, the analysis that Jim's referring to is what Heidi Smith, hey Heidi, if you're out there, at Park Ridge did, is really excellent use of data that she did for her board in terms of you know, the costs, the financial costs of furloughs or layoffs, not to mention the human cost. I mean, there is definitely going to be an effect on morale if you do that, as I'm sure you've all thought of. So we'll see what we can do to get some answers and some communication out. But I do recommend that Heidi's, yes, very eloquently written, Heidi's analysis and memo on the director's list. And if she's listening, maybe she'll put it out there again so people can find it. Thank you, Jim.
Sure, and I'm sorry, I don't want to harp on this, but can I just get into that expense reimbursement one more time?
Oh, all right.
So, and I'm not contesting what you heard from somebody from the Department of Labor, but I'm just saying that a verbal opinion from even a high level Department of Labor official, it wouldn't supersede the regulations in place, and it certainly wouldn't supersede the law. And right now they say that expenses do have to be reimbursed. Until there's a change officially, I would be hesitant to rely on anybody's verbal representation, because worst case scenario, we get some library employees file complaints with the Department of Labor or even file lawsuits. And who's to say that administrative law judge or circuit court judge is going to agree with this verbal statement? It wouldn't have a binding authority, so they might view this differently. So I would be hesitant not to pay some reasonable expenses for work from home until there's something more official from the Department of Labor. But I'm going to keep looking into it, and if we get more information, I'll certainly provide it.
I think and I understand, I certainly understand what you're saying, and I'm not, again, everybody has to do what they think is right, but you know, it's also another, you know, expense that you may have at some point to justify to your taxpayers who are already, you know, concerned about people who are working or being paid or not working or something like that. Any indication of property taxes being delayed in Illinois? Nothing official, but I think we all have to assume that there's not going to be good news about revenue. So I mean, that's we just have to live with that. and see what happens. I mean, that's why we have to keep saying how essential we are and serve as many people as we can in as many ways as we can and keep people safe. Okay, thank you, Jim, Krieger, and Griffin.
I was wondering that, but thanks, Jim. The other Jim too, very enlightening and adding to our conversation here.
Sure, and any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to us directly. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to back to cleaning issues. We did clean our buildings, as I think I told you last time. I hope that you have also done so or are going to do so. We do have a list of cleaners, and we also have the EPA approved list of cleaning solutions on the Pulse page. And there is a webinar on Friday. Oh, I guess the webinar is full, but the recording will be available later. Anything more to say about that, Monica or Mark? No? Okay.
Yeah, I did have, I apologize. I couldn't get my mute button off. So can you guys hear me? I'm on a new headset. So
Yep,
great. Okay, outstanding. Great. Thank you. I was just going to briefly share the experience that Rails went through with cleaning our buildings. Just some briefly touch on 6 different areas: the range of services, the number of vendors contacted, the cost for services, square feet versus cubic feet, areas cleaned, and then site time. As far as range of services, that's really going to depend on the on your particular circumstances. There's a few that I can just name of different services. The traditional spray and wipe, which is kind of labor intensive. The deep cleaning disinfectant spray, which is I think is a lot more effective and covers more ground than, or you can do a combination of both. And that's primarily recommended when you're looking at if you had a case of the COVID-19 within your building. Rails chose to just use the deep cleaning spray. And as you just mentioned, Dee, there is the list of acceptable cleaners from the EPA available on our Pulse page. This was an interesting number that I wanted to share. It was a total of 47 companies that we actually contacted, and that was primarily due to not all companies will service all of our buildings since we're spread out throughout the state, and we were also looking for the best price. There's also a couple of those companies on the Pulse page as well. Once again, we're not endorsing any of those at all. But it also lists the 3 companies that we actually did use, which was Citywide Cleaning for our Burr Ridge, Bolingbrook, and Rockford Center, Clean Impact LLC for our East Peoria property, and ServPro for the Cove Valley property. Briefly touch on costs. That's a huge range from 2 cents to $1 square foot, and that's also going to be dependent on the service in which you're looking for. The traditional spray and wipe was going to range from 25 cents to 50 cents a square foot. The disinfectant spray would run from 2 cents to 25 cents, and 50 cents to $1 if you wanted to do the combination of both. We were actually able to get a pretty good rate of 9 cents a square foot for the disinfectant spray. So we spent less than $4,000 to clean all of our properties, and that's also including our vehicles as well. One thing that I wanted to point out, be very careful when you're looking at square foot versus cubic foot. We utilized the square foot when we cleaned our for the quotes for our buildings, because you can get different quotes for the same building. For one of our properties, we got a quote for $2,000 for 88,000 cubic feet, 88,000 cubic feet, versus if we use the square foot, which only costs us $239. So just be real careful when you're looking at that, So as far as the areas for cleaning and use for the disinfectant spray, and I think that's any area that's acceptable to germs and bacteria, which pretty much means the whole building. You know, the walls, the door handles, the desks, the phones, the washroom stalls, light switches, etc. You know, so, and as I mentioned earlier, we actually completed our fleet as well, just spraying the inside of our vehicles. You know, the disinfectant spray is supposed to kill about 99.9% of the bacteria for up to 4 hours and dries permanently in about 2 hours. The equipment is a really cool George Jetson style backpack the guys come in with, and they spray this mist throughout the building. You know, one thing to recommend is to remove any paper goods and things of that nature, Kleenex, paper towels and things of that nature, because you don't want to use those after the spray actually gets on them. So you want to make sure that you do remove those items. And then also any papers that are left out on your desk will actually wrinkle also from the actual spray. So I would do somewhat of a nice cleanup before you guys have the work done within the buildings. And as far as time is concerned, a building that's about 3,500 square feet would take about 45 minutes. Up to about 2 hours for a building that's about 15,000 square feet, you know, so. But most importantly, shop around. You know, that's the biggest thing I could say is shop around to make sure you get the best price, because there's a lot of people out there providing the service. Great.
Thank you, Mark. That was extremely helpful. It's so nice to have specific information about specific things that can be done and then checked off, right? The lack of those these days. Okay, any more questions? I see there are people still talking about concerns. Yes, I can. Yes, right. You know, running things through the AMH is, you know, enough said about the safe handling of materials. We haven't figured it out yet. Just one last thing on the building piece. Well, it's about the FEMA, the IEMA grants. That the window for applying is closed, but we did receive some. I think we're going to actually get some financial, you know, reimbursement for some of the work that we did for cleaning our buildings. Okay, we are going to move on now to library plans to reopen, because of course that, you know, we do have to be planning for it even if we're not ready to do it. So I'm going to also let Monica talk about this, and then we have also Jennifer Cottrell from Midlothian. So go ahead, Monica.
Thank you, Dee. So here at Rails, we are hearing a ton of conversation about reopening. I know that many of you are developing your plans to try to determine what your best course of action is for reopening, and that your boards are very interested in this information as well. There's been a lot of really good conversation happening on the Rails director list, and I know I've heard that a lot of you are having some great conversations with some of your more central regional lists as well. Rails is requesting that if you have reopening plans that you would be willing to share with us, we would love to see that. I know that you probably saw that in the most recent e-news, and it is on our Pulse page. If you don't want us to share those with others, you can let us know that. We're just trying to compile as much information we can, in part for things like those case studies that we talked about earlier, but talking about exactly what people are thinking of doing and all the pieces that they're considering. One piece that we have seen that has been very popular with a lot of folks as they're considering reopening is coming up with a phased set of plans for reopening. And one library director who is generous enough to share her very detailed plan with the director's list is Jennifer Cottrell from the Midlothian Public Library. We asked if she would speak to you all today a little bit about her process and how things are continuing to change and move. Are you available, Jennifer?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I will speak about my plans and my process. I'm honored to be asked and a little bit humbled because I am certainly not an expert, but then again, none of us are. So it's a little bit like the blind leading the blind, but I'll share the process that I went through. I first off want to give credit to Cherie Kozalaha from Homer Township and David Celeb from Oak Park, who shared some questions and plans early on the director's listserv that got my gears turning and starting to formulate the plan that I have. I am going to attempt to screen share here. Nope, I shared the wrong thing. That's the Rails. There it is. All right. I knew something would go wrong tech-wise. It's in my browser. Why can't I share it? There it is. Okay. So I started out with a bunch of caveats, and basically this is the Donald Rumsfeld part of my plan. All of the unknowns, all of the unknown unknowns, as he would say. And I think this really speaks to what Dee was saying, that there is a lot that we don't know at this point as far as what is going to be safe when. And so everything that I have here is with the great big caveat that we don't know what's going to be possible when. So I sort of feel like I've been playing make-believe because we don't know so much, but I have been envisioning, okay, what is the most gradually possible way we could reopen the library? And you know, I started out thinking about the materials and how to start getting materials back in the building, because as many of you are doing, our book drop is currently locked, and we don't want to necessarily deal with a huge inundation over a couple of days when we start getting those back. So we're thinking of putting a very gradual period of just getting the word out there to the public, asking them to return the books so that we can safely process them before we reopen. At this point, we're sort of guesstimating that a 3-day quarantine for books is what we'll go with. But again, I'm very interested to see what further data and research comes out on that. And also during that time, doing some things to get out of the public area, some of the things that might be more dangerous, such as the soft furniture covers. Some of those have been professionally cleaned, but some of those are not. And at every phase, I've been thinking, what's the minimum number of staff we can have in the building to do this adequately, but keep people safely. One of the things that I put into my plan is what has to happen before we can start this phase. And sort of a rule of thumb that I've been going by, every time a staff member, a manager, a member of my leadership team raises the question, well, what about this? It's kind of become my mantra, well, if we have to be thinking about that, we're probably not ready to go to that phase yet. So to start the materials collection phase, the stay-at-home order would have to be lifted so that employees can actually go to the building. We'd have to have some sealing plastic bins for quarantining the books, and we'd have to have enough non-medical masks and gloves for staff. And a really important thing I think that we need to think about is the best practices for glove use, because if you are reusing gloves, wearing them for long periods of time, then it's worse than not having any gloves. You have to use best practices and have enough gloves so that you're not just moving the virus from one surface to another using those gloves. And then, of course, like many of you are thinking, I'm envisioning that the next phase would be curbside pickup, thinking about how patrons would request those materials, thinking about doing advisory over the phone, because some patrons may not know specifically what books they want. They just want some books or some materials. I was grateful for Swan talking about curbside delivery at their fireside chat this week. The idea of making face shields available, using the trunk, not the window of the car, was good advice. and starting no contact homebound at this point, thinking of purchasing some plastic containers instead of the usual bags that we use for homebound delivery. And again, thinking what's the fewest number of people in the building at a given time. Thinking of having some daytime and some evening hours because not all patrons are available during the days. And then gradually broaden curbside service to include materials that are delivered once delivery is re-implemented. But as I hear what Dee is saying, you know, maybe holding off on doing this at all until delivery is re-implemented, because that means Rails has decided with confidence what the best sterilization practices are with regard for materials. The thing I'm really, really concerned about is, I believe one director, I think it was Julie Durkin, mentioned in the chat, is getting access to the building for those folks who don't have a computer at all. Because if we all, as we all know, that even if we're offering Wi-Fi in our parking lots, there are some people who simply don't have the devices to connect to Wi-Fi, and they need the internet for applying for unemployment, applying for other benefits, doing other activities that really are essential. And so for my extremely limited walk-in service phase, I was really thinking about computers a lot and how to get people safely on computers, how to limit sessions so that people are sharing the time and not monopolizing them, having enough wipes to wipe down the computers. And really what's going to enable that phase to start is having enough materials. Right now, all of those antiseptic wipes, all of those supplies that are used to make antiseptic wipes, even homemade ones, are going to the hospitals and medical facilities right now. So I would not want to enter this phase unless I were assured of having a reliable source of antiseptic wipes and viable substitutes, because if we run out, then we'd have to close again. The other phases of my plans, gradually having people be able to sit on hardware, and then gradually having them able to use the majority of the library, back to finally reintroducing programming. I have no idea how long this will take. But then I've also included summer reading considerations, because somewhere in this process, we're gonna have to start with summer reading, and have given thought to really, really strongly encouraging people to use online logging, but introducing some ways of still doing phone-in or paper logs for those to participate who don't have computer access, but purchasing screen sharing software and IM chat software so that staff can do a lot of advising patrons on how to log their books from home if they can. So I have way more details in the plan, but I've probably talked for long enough, and I will share a link to this plan. This is the third draft, and this is what is going to my board next week, but I'm sure there'll be many, many more drafts before it actually gets implemented. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Jennifer. You're getting lots of positive comments from our our colleagues and from us as well. Thank you for sharing. Thank you to David Selib also. You know, we want to be helpful in this regard also. We know you're all thinking about this. We don't want everybody to, doesn't seem like a good use of time for everybody to be making their own plan. So, you know, let us come up with a way of organizing some plans that we get, and then we can share them out, and, you know, everybody can, you know, learn from each other as we're so good at doing. I wanted to say something else about staff and reopening, and it goes back to a question that Tim Jarzemski asked a while ago about staff that have, you know, health issues. I mean, there are definitely going to be, you know, people who work for you who aren't going to want to come back to work at all, obviously, who are not going to feel safe coming back to work, you know, because they've been ill or well, lots of reasons. And so I think, that's another thing that we're going to have to bear in mind. People who have compromised immune systems, they're not going to feel safe coming into a public building. So I think, we've talked at Rails about this, and, we're going to be as flexible as we can possibly be, because this is a human issue and a health issue, but it's definitely something that we also have to think about in terms of reopening. What did you want to say anything about social distancing, Monica?
I just thought I would share with you all, and I'll put it into the chat. This is also available on the Rails webpage. I want to thank Ryan Uden from Indian Trails for sending this on, but it's a document that's from SHRM that is about social distancing at work. It's actually kind of an infographic style that came out in early March, but I think it really applies to as you're thinking about spaces, your shared spaces, your public spaces, for how some of those things are that you want to consider. So even things as simple as the lunchroom that you have in your library, how do you want to look at that? How do you want to look at your computer labs? All of the considerations for spaces that we have that are currently shared, and how this may change. Even if we're back in our buildings, we may not just be back to normal. So just a good chance to look at some of those things as you're considering your own plans and considering communication to staff.
Thank you. Yes. So, all right. Well, that is the agenda, and we've talked about a lot of stuff. There's so much to think about. So wish we had some easy answers, but we don't. We just, as Jim Krieger said earlier, this is not. He said it to Rails before we started. This is not a snow closing. This is not a discrete thing that's happening. So it's very difficult. It's very uncomfortable and unpleasant, but we just have to hang in there. We've gotten through a month of it, so we have to just keep going. So is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up right now? Please do. Anything we didn't get to that we should get to now? I mean, we're going to be looking at the chat. We'll get back to stuff. You have anything, Mary, that we should?
Nothing that I think we can answer. There have been a few questions about whether people will still have to use per capita grant funds by the usual deadline. So I think we have to check with the state library on that. There were some questions about the non-resident stuff. We will put an article in the next week's e-news with the information that Greg McCormick had sent. And Deirdre had posted that to the director's list, if any of you are on the director's list. But we will follow up on that. I think those were here's another letter about the per capita. We do not know about the per capita grant. So we're going to have to find out about that. There have been several questions about that. I think that's it. And I don't think we've planned another update. Someone's asking about when we're going to have another member update. We've been averaging every 2 weeks. Seems to work, but we'll have them as needed. So
yeah, we'll wait. I mean, it seems to sort of organically, it's like, oh, it's time to have another member update. So I think maybe we won't need one. Wouldn't that be great? I don't think so, but everybody's doing a great job. We just have to keep doing it and do it together. So
oh, sorry, this is Griffin.
Yes.
I'm sorry, is there any way I could just real briefly plug something that we're putting together?
Sure, please.
Thank you. So we're developing a special leadership webinar series for library managers and persons in charge. We're going to have more information on our website soon, but we think it'll be really helpful for all you libraries out there.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you've been providing great information, great help. Thank you, Jim, to all your colleagues as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right then. On that note, we will sign off. Thank you, everyone.